star date. I forgot to calculate a star date before I did this. But welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a very special edition where we are sitting down with Robb Pearlman and Erin Macdonald to talk about some really exciting new books that have just come out. So Robb Pearlman is a pop culturist and a number one New York Times bestselling author of more than 60 books for both grownups and kids. And he's also worked across many a fandom and within the Star Trek franchise, as well as Bob's Burgers. I was really excited to see that list. Welcome, Robb. And we also have Erin Macdonald, PhD in astrophysics, who is a tattooed one-woman STEM career panel with recognition as a researcher, speaker, engineer, consultant, and is now a writer and producer in Los Angeles. And she is also one of the science consultants for the Star Trek franchise. Welcome.
Hi, happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have y'all with me today. I did just want to comment. We just had a big Trek week with New York Comic Con that just passed, and lots of fun things got released or finally out in the world. Was there anything you were particularly excited about that came out from Comic Con this past week?
For me, it was the trailer for the second half of The Prodigy. So the next sort of chunk of 10 episodes. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. That was neat to see.
That was great. And for me, it was Picard. seeing all my friends back together.
It was such really a warm, fuzzy feeling seeing that panel all up there.
It was.
I know. And I was really excited to finally get to see some Discovery content because after Star Trek Day, I was like, oh, I know we got the tour, but I wanted to see more. So I was really excited to see the trailer. So yes, it is an exciting time to be a Star Trek fan for sure. And Erin, I know you've been a guest on the podcast before, but for any new listeners, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to working with Star Trek?
Yeah, briefly, I kind of came from a science communication standpoint. So when I left academia, I sort of scratched my teaching itch by going to sci-fi conventions and teaching the science behind Star Trek and Star Wars, Mass Effect, all the other sort of franchises that I know and love. And when I moved to Los Angeles after a few years, I kind of got on the radar of CBS to just come and give these talks at their conventions, at the official Star Trek events. And then in season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, they got a new showrunner, Michelle Paradise, and she reached out to ask for some science help to myself and my friend, Professor Mohammed Noor. And then season 3 went really well. I'm here in Los Angeles. I do work as a science advisor. And so they brought me on sort of as the official science advisor for the whole franchise, just as much or as little as any show wants to use me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Robb, first time being with us here at Star Trek Discovery Podcast, so welcome. And one of my favorite things to ask people is, what is like your first or maybe favorite Trek memory?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I remember weekends when I was really little, like Saturday afternoons, my grandparents and my parents, we'd all be at home together and Star Trek would be on. And Star Trek was one of those few shows ever on the air where lots of generations from any family could watch and enjoy it in their own different way. So I was watching it as a little kid, playing with my action figures in front of the TV, enjoying all the space and the alien stuff. And my parents were enjoying it on another level and my grandparents were enjoying it on another level. And I was able to talk to everybody about all of it. So it was this really beautiful sort of communal family moment that I'm sure was experienced by tons of, millions of people across the country all the time. So having that kind of memory was really formative for me.
Yeah, I love that so much. It is one of those things where it's like, and it relates so much today to our discussion about these books, is like this idea that you get to pass on something that you love to other people in your family. And now we've had so many generations of Star Trek kind of made available to us. I'm really excited that we continue to expand it into more kid-friendly and family-friendly content. Although I remember as like probably like a 10, 11-year-old starting to watch Voyager with my family when it was airing on UPN right after MASH. that was my evening, for better or for worse, whatever that did to my media diet. Better. But yes, I'm excited to talk to y'all about. So for those listening, and if you get to watch the video, definitely check it out. But otherwise, you should be purchasing them. The most adorable books. We have Star Trek, My First Book of Colors, written by Robb Pearlman with illustrations by Jason Kaiser. And we have Star Trek, My First Book of Space, written by Erin Macdonald and illustrations also by Jason. I was so delighted when these showed up in my mailbox and I got to flip through them. I'm like low-key obsessed with the little like space I was like, I'm gonna get like this whole book tattooed on me. I think that's what's gonna happen. The jellyfish is like so adorable. I need to be getting artwork put all over my body, but
Jason will be thrilled. Oh my gosh.
They are so cute. But I wanted to ask y'all first if you remembered what were some of your favorite books as kids? Like what were some of your like favorites to dig into?
For me, I had the Sesame Street book, The Monster at the End of the Book. That was a classic. That was probably one of my favorites. I mean, I had all the little golden books. I've just been like an IP nerd my whole life. I want to read about what I'm watching. I just want to live in those worlds. I think that's probably the one that stands out the most for me.
Yeah. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, that's my number one book of all time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The monster at the end of the book.
The monster at the end of the book. And in fact, it's still so important. I bought the t-shirt, I have the mug, I've got the socks. Whenever a new little person is born into family and friends, that's the one book my mom buys because she knows how much it meant for me. And I think, Erin, to your point, I was a pop culture kid, even though I didn't know it. So I was able to read about Grover and then see Grover on TV. And that was just amazing to me. It still is, actually.
It's great, Rob. I don't think I knew this fact about you. We've been friends for so long, and this is like a new friendship fact. That we had the same favorite book growing up.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I love when that happens, when you find out new things about your friends and you're like, wait a second.
I still have my original copy too.
Wow, that's awesome.
I was a super careful kid, but oh yeah, it's so great.
Oh man, I was not a super careful kid. All of mine are gone. I was a big going on a bear hunt was probably like one of my absolute
that's
favorites.
A good one.
And I think I bought that for my niece when she was born. But I feel like there's such a fun array of like new kids books, and so I always like seeing what's kind of coming out and coming around and how it blends that sort of education with entertainment aspect. Like I just bought my niece a book that it's essentially a retelling of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but she's like a STEM genius. And so it's like her and her 7 robots. And I was like, oh, this is so much nicer than the original Brothers Grimm. Like all of those fairy tales were terrifying.
Yeah, I love, there's a book series I always get from my friends when they've got new babies, which is there's general relativity for babies and like quantum physics for babies. And it's like the most complex concepts in physics. They've distilled them into board books. And yeah, those are delightful.
It's always so fun.
And I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but just to prove that I'm not making this up, here's the Super Grover that sits on my desk and has been sitting on my desk for years.
Oh,
so I'm not lying about it.
I love that like puppets also hold such a place for so many people, I feel like, in our generation too. I don't know. I was having a discussion with some friends about like how much we love puppets, and it was like, I don't know why it's there, but it's there. And then it's like the longer you think about it, you're like, oh, this all makes sense, that like all of my core childhood favorite memories have something to do with a puppet of some kind. And one of the things I really love about these particular books too is they are obviously chock full of so many Trek moments and like references that I think that any Trek fan parent is going to just be like, oh yes, from scants to Gorns and like coffee nebulas. What were some of your favorite pieces to kind of bring in? What's like maybe your favorite reference you got to write into your book?
I mean, I love a good Gorn joke. So whenever I can put a Gorn in, that's really great for me. I think one of the things we wanted to make these books have is practicality and usability. We wanted these books to be real books that kids could use from, that could learn from, but chock full of all of those Easter eggs for adult collectors. And then things that are a little weird, like, things aren't black and white, clearly, in these books or in World. So the fact that we could use like pinkish, purplish, that would start a conversation with kids, to ask their parents about different shades of pink or different shades of blue. And I think being able to sort of very subtly add those questions into the space book too, to form those bases of discussions, that was important for me.
Yeah, I mean, for my favorite sort of reference is the coffee and the nebula. I mean, please. I mean, Janeway's my woman. That's where it lies. But yeah, to Robb's point, we've got like a page on dark matter, and it's like, we don't know what dark matter is. Maybe you do, and so just to leave that of like, I think that's so powerful for kids to learn about science and the world around us in general, that like, there's still stuff no one knows, and there are people whose job it is to try to find those answers, and they're called researchers, and like that can sometimes blow kids' minds because it's always presented to the kids of like, the grown-ups have all the knowledge and we're just gonna like drip feed you knowledge as you get older and older, and it's like, no, like there is no end really to the amount of stuff that we know, and a kid reading it might be the one to discover what dark matter is. And I think that's what gets me so passionate about science education, particularly.
There was a moment when Erin was writing the book, and I said, "Can we describe what dark matter is?" And she was like, "No." And I'm like, "We can figure it out." And she was like, "No, we can't." I'm like, "Erin, you're super smart. I know you can do this." I can't do this, but you can do it. And it turns out she can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because science.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. That's why I stick to the colors.
I know, but even in the colors, I love that explanation of like the pinkish and bluish, like the idea that like you're leaving these rooms, leaving room for parents and kids to have these like little moments of discovery and to learn that asking questions is like really important. And like, there's going to be things like, I can't wait for a kid to be like, what is a Gorn, like to a parent and having to explain that. And I think it's also like, you've made it so I don't know, it's like fun, it's whimsical. In both the space book and the colors book, it's an easy way to get at least like a bite of something that might interest you later on, because these are like my first books, right? Like this is like very early, but again, I think as like parents and as fans, they're definitely collectory items because they're like beautifully made and there's like fun references in there. And so I think y'all did an amazing job. Where did, I guess, how did the idea come to y'all? What was like the process of working on these and kind of coming up with the ideas?
So my very first Star Trek book was Fun with Kirk and Spock, which, for those of you who don't know, was sort of a mashup between the Fun with Dick and Jane books and Kirk and Spock. And that came about because I work in book publishing. So I was going to all of these book conventions, and also I'm a Star Trek guy and a pop culture guy, so I was going to all these pop culture conventions, and I was always really taken, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the way people were talking about their favorite children's books when they were growing up was very similar to the way they talk about Star Trek growing up, about watching it with friends and family and having their favorite episodes and going back to certain things. So I thought, I wonder if there's a way to sort of combine those into a fun thing for adult collectors. And that's when Fun with Kirk and Spock came out. And then afterward, I was really surprised at how many parents were coming over to me and saying, this was my kid's first Star Trek book, or my kids want to read this Star Trek book every night. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I wonder what else we could do in the kids space for it. So it took a few years until this happened, but Erin and I became really, really good friends, and I thought, I wonder if there is a way to present a STEAM library to kids. So many people who Erin and I meet at conventions or just in everyday life, scientists, explorers who are inspired to go into their chosen fields because of Star Trek. I meet lots of writers and artists who were inspired to do creative things because of Star Trek. And I thought, how can we distill that and inspire the next generation to do it? And I thought, oh, well, if we do, maybe these board book primers, maybe that would work. And amazingly, everyone got on board with it. And, I didn't want it to be just a very sort of, this is a star, this is the color blue. That's boring. It's been done 1,000 times before. That doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. So we put our heads together and figured out a way that sort of blended everything we loved about Star Trek with actual usable facts.
Yeah, I think that was so important to me too, was to really make the words that they're learning be accurate, because we don't want to blend the science that we have in Star Trek that might not have been discovered yet. And we didn't want to confuse anything. So what they're learning is, like, literally, even though we say some people might think there's coffee in a nebula, we're still explaining it's actually just dust and gas. And so finding a way to still make it educational, but like Rob said, to just have it be kind of fun and whimsical. And it's such an honor for me, because I've wanted to write sort of a space Star Trek book for a long time. The things kind of along the lines of what Rob has been able to do with his career, and just try to continue using Star Trek to teach science. And so the fact that this is sort of my first one, and it's for age 0 for the start, just makes me really happy.
If you could make sort of the next jump right in age bracket, what do you think you would want to sort of talk about? How would you sort of alter some of these topics, or are there books and things you recommend that you like now, as far as okay, this is everyone's first book, and then as kids grow, because they grow so fast, what would be some recommendations for next steps? Yeah.
Well, I think it's just diving deeper into these topics, because I have friends with kids who are sort of 6, 7, and 8 who are loving these books because they're reading the words now on their own. The pictures are really cool. Even though it's a board book, they're kind of beyond the, I think 5 or 6 are like, that's a baby's book. And now they're just like, oh, cool pictures, man. And they're asking but I want to know more about a nebula. I want to know more about a star. So it's really just taking, the sort of story arc that we tell in the space book is the cosmological address, starting at our planet and then moving out from there. And so that similar structure, I think, is a great way to introduce people to space. And I think just diving deeper into what all of these things are. I mean, trying to rein myself in to write, what was it, 11 sentences on space was real hard. I'd like a little more, please.
I was going to ask, was there maybe a concept or something you wanted to include in either book that you were that essentially hit the cutting room floor, and you're ooh, maybe I can find a different space for this to live in?
Writing kids' books is really difficult. I think there's maybe 75, 100 words in each of these books. They're really short. So each word has to matter. So the first version of a manuscript is often a couple hundred words, because you want to get everything down on the paper, and then you just keep editing down and down and down and down. Erin, I think for space, there were some concepts that we just ran out of space, I think, for it. And it just, no pun, but, and it just got too complicated to explain something.
I think that was it. I think we wanted to put some stuff on black holes in there, and then maybe I think, didn't we want to try to work in some jokes about sentient artificial intelligence?
We did.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just the creative process, right? That's just bouncing ideas around together and deciding what works and what doesn't, what keeps the flow really nice. Because it's black holes in particular. Once you start talking about those, kids are like, but what? Tell me everything.
My first book of black holes will be next.
Right.
That's all the book's about.
And so after colors, I think the next progression is probably Fun with Kirk and Spock, because those are short little stories with really great illustrations. And then after that, there's a full-length picture book called The Girl Who Made the Stars that I wrote based on a short trek.
Yeah.
So that could be a next progression for picture books for kids too. And then after that, in January, I have a middle grade novel coming out based on Star Trek Prodigy. So that's
so exciting.
Yeah, I'm bringing kids all the way through.
That's so great. I was literally having a conversation today with a friend of mine who has 2 kiddos, and they just introduced them to Prodigy, and they're like really excited for the next series. And she was so funny. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I'm talking to the writers this afternoon. I'm really excited about it. And she was just like, well, is there a claim to those books once you're done? She was like looking through in my office, and I was just like, I'll see, but I might want them. I was like, I can probably order you some more. I know we've talked a little bit about the illustrations, especially in the colors book, but is there a particular character or a page that you've really enjoyed, Rob, that's like maybe one of your favorites?
Oh gosh, so many.
There's
So many.
Cute.
You know, I kind of love the big green hand one a little bit, just because it's so simple and in a way so incredibly sweet. Like the way Jason was able just to form the hand to not make it look menacing.
Yeah, it reminds me of like seeing a kid reach in for a toy. Like that's kind of what it felt like to me.
Yes. And then the last spread that talks about infinite diversity and infinite combinations and just what he was able to do with that spacescape, as far as like proportion and colors, I think it's just a beautiful spread.
Yeah. And then Erin, what's really fun about the space book is it is a combination of both the illustrations as well as actual photos from space, which I love because it's like, and I was totally like, this is such an Erin thing for it to be like real photos of space. Because it's like, it's going to be accurate and correct, just like you were saying about like the terms that are being used. And they're so beautiful. I think, I mean, my favorite was the nebula, but is there a particular photo that you were really excited that you all got to use in the book?
Yeah, that for me it's the dark matter one. I think that's probably my favorite, just because I love. We've had a few of those. I actually have a version kind of tattooed on my arm of that as well, from the space image perspective. But even just seeing things, because I think that's what's been so incredible over like the last couple decades of space exploration is the improvement in technology, and they be able to get these images. You know, we're seeing that from even just from the Hubble, which blew all of our minds, into the JWST results. Like the transition of those images, it blows your mind, and it's awe-inspiring, and you just are completely floored by it. And so, yeah, just picking sort of those images that evoke that feeling of wonder when you look at it and you're like, that can't be real. That's not real. And it is. So I really like that. And then I just love the drawings on top. I love the Klingon ship slingshotting around the sun.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, that's up there. And then I really like the Bajoran solar sail as well, because that's one of my favorite episodes. And so I was really happy that made it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're so great. It's so fun. So if you had to pick another random topic for a Star Trek, my first book of ... So another first book, what would that topic be?
Ooh.
We've tossed out the idea of black holes, and we know the Kirk and Spock is our next adventure, but if there was another first book.
I mean, I like the STEAM theme that we were able to have. You know, I think being able to show people that science and art are very intermingled, like that's something that I really love the opportunity to do. So continuing along those lines, I think. But
I think if there was a way for us to like combine them into like my first book of STEAM, like I'd have little bits and pieces from all of it to really present that one trajectory. Yeah.
Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. I was like, maybe there's something sitting right on top of the brain, but sometimes it's not there. But because yeah, then I was like, what would I do? I think there could be something with like shapes, and I think like all of the set pieces, because I'm always obsessed with like the set design of Star Trek shows, and I think there's always such a fun, like, especially going back to the original series, there's such fun like shapes and colors being used on all of this.
Yeah.
That could be quite fun. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the process of making these? What should, I mean, I'm going to put links in the show notes where people can purchase these because they are out now. I'm a big fan of shopping at bookshop.org, so you can also support a local bookstore with your purchase there. And I double checked, and they are available there. So you can purchase them there, but support independent bookstores while you can. But yeah, anything else you'd want to share that I didn't ask about?
I mean, this was a really fun process for me, and I was just honored to be able to work with Robb and come out with these products that I'm really proud of, and I really hope that we all hope to have an impact on kids' lives in one form or another, and just the idea that this could be one kid's favorite book, in 30 years when they're being interviewed about their new book, be like, man, that first book of colors, that Gorn was my favorite buddy. That's a big deal for me.
Yeah, I think, it's creating a book is always a group process. It's never just one person doing everything. And if it is just one person doing everything, it's going to be a really lousy book. So I always try to work with people I like and respect. And this was one of the best experiences, truly, because in addition to us all having a shared goal and a real understanding of what we wanted to do, we also just have a shared deep appreciation for Star Trek and for writing and for kids and for fandom. So having all of those things happen when you get to work with a really great friend, it's just magic. And I think that comes through in the final book too. I think when you read each page, you can hear us, but you can also hear Star Trek, and you can hear the love that we try to put in it.
Absolutely. I feel like the more people I talk to who work on Star Trek currently, like the more I'm like, oh, it's just a bunch of fans making stuff for other fans. Like people who like have this deep love and appreciation and want to make sure that they're conveying that love and appreciation into what they're making. And I definitely felt that in like every page of this book. I was like, oh, these are references that like someone thought about and loves and like wants to put that on the page and like have this moment for kids to be able to like welcome them into this continuing fandom. And like the more that the franchise expands, the more I feel like it's just improving all the way around and making space for so many people to be welcomed into it. So thank you all for being a part of that journey for a bunch of new tiny little Trekkies.
Thank you.
Thanks. Everyone's welcome in the Federation. Come on.
Exactly.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. Congratulations on publication. And until next time, listeners, we will be back. Live long and prosper. Bye.